We're here to further security objectives by collecting intelligence, providing useful analysis, and conducting effective covert action, sir.
Very good, Dedra. That is verbatim from the ISB mission statement and wrong. Security is an illusion. You want security? Call the Navy.
You fall here. You fall alone.
Peaceful life. You think you're hard to read? You need to get over that. Now you have a plan already. You had it before they finished speaking. I want your assessment.
Propaganda will only get you so far. You need a radical insurgency you can count on.
You know, when Dedra Meero said those words, my jaw dropped to the ground. Like most of you out there, I've been kept in the dark about Andor Season 2, so all the clues I've had about what's going on this season came from the trailers and all the clips that were released. And Dedra Meero really doesn't look great in those trailers. She's panicking, she looks super stressed in another scene. I thought maybe she was finally regretting her allegiance to the Empire. And in all honesty, that could still happen, as we'll explain in this video. But watching Dedra Meero out-evil Orson Krennic's stupid marketing goons with a false flag-controlled opposition conspiracy, again, made my jaw drop. I mean, this is a small working group that Orson Krennic has set up. It's clearly an homage to Hitler's Eagle Nest or the secret meetings to plan the final solution. To think that Dedra Meero would have the final word at this meeting? I mean, how else can you see her but as an extremely evil person? Well, that's the confusing and also terrifying part of Dedra Meero. She does not fit into the classic mold of a Star Wars villain. Everything about Dedra Meero screams precision. Her hair is bounded so tightly that not even a single strand can fall and contaminate whatever crime scene she's walking through. Her crisp posture and gait, combined with those dress whites, brings a menacing energy to any room she enters. It's no wonder professional people users like Orson Krennic and Major Partagaz immediately notice her and give her an opportunity to flourish. Which, if you know anything about the Empire, is very, rigid hierarchy and Sith-like work culture is a rarity. Generally, Imperials are well known for tearing each other down rather than giving each other support, as we'll see in the interactions between Inspector Dedra Meero and Blevin. But even then, that whole situation, unbeknownst to Blevin, was just sort of a test. A lesson designed to shore up Dedra Meero's weaknesses. Individuals like Major Partagaz collect people. They're always looking for very talented individuals. Orson Krennic does the same thing, but he has even more power. And they both focused on Dedra. You see, during one of the ISB intelligence briefings, Dedra Meero made a very important connection. A Starpath navigation unit had been stolen from her sector on Steerguard and somehow reappeared on Ferrix after that little incident between Cassian and the tactical blueberries. Your average ISB supervisor is not going to notice this because they are so occupied with jealously guarding their territory from their colleagues who they really don't trust. This is definitely a sign of insecurity and possibly imposter syndrome, or more likely a subconscious acceptance of one's lack of skill, which creates this anxiety, this lashing out effect. People who are good at what they do, they don't spend time sabotaging others. They're secure in themselves, and instead of looking at other people, they focus on their work. They do what they love. And it's very clear that Dedra Meero is one of these types of people. She really enjoys her job. She fits in perfectly. And so during these briefings, while all the other ISB officers are looking suspiciously at each other and plotting, Dedra is actually listening and doing her job. She's reading through all the reports. Her mind is uncluttered by office politics, and this is why she picks up on these little details. And not everyone can do this, mind you. Knowledge can be learned. It can be studied. Wisdom, you gather through experience, usually. But to have a quick mind, to be quick-witted, that is something you're simply just born with. Some people have it, other people don't. And in this case, making quick connections between two otherwise unrelated cases is a showcase of Dedra's quick wit. This is how she uncovers this Axis network. Something that even the cunning Major Partagaz is not completely sure exists. I mean, that's how secure Luthor operation is. It's very impressive that Dedra could figure this thing out. And when she uses this wit on Cyril Karn's mom, well, that's really impressive as well. Prior to this, Eedy Karn was the scariest woman in the galaxy, and potentially also a powerful Sith Lord that loves torturing her prey before consuming, whatever positive emotions they have left in their bodies after she's done with them. She loves stringing her son along in the most vile, manipulative, and passive-aggressive ways. She loves using intimate knowledge of her son's personality and potential disorders to basically dismantle him on a daily basis and destroy his soul, only to pour cereal for poor Cyril before she sends him out the door to make some more money for the family. Watching this confrontation between Dedra and her mother-in-law, it's like watching Ahsoka deflate that Inquisitor in Tales of the Jedi, who had up until that point been terrifying.
This game ends now. You want Cyril in your life, you will think before you speak. I'll make sure he visits twice a month. I'll make sure that he calls you. I will guarantee a level of engagement, but it will be inversely proportional to the volume of anxiety.
You can see Eedy Karn's made a gross miscalculation here. While she bullies her own son for her own twisted pleasure, Dedra over here is used to dealing with some of the most vile and dangerous and cruel criminals in the entire galaxy. Remember, she comes from the ISB enforcement wing. That's no joke. And she knows exactly how to dismantle someone like Eedy, who, behind all that malice, is just a frail little old woman with very little true power, other than the power a mother can wield over their son.
You can spare me the Uncle Harlow testimonials. I've had a look at his ISB criminal files, and that is not a story you want to be advertising.
When Dedra destroys Cyril's mom, she does this to protect Cyril. The same Cyril who chased her across the galaxy pursuing the same criminals she's after, who inadvertently and heroically saved her life, or at least prevented a mob from brutally beating her to death and God knows what else. Forget what you and I know about the Empire, how evil and harmful it is to the galaxy, because Cyril and Dedra Meero don't see themselves in this way. I feel like most people who are enforcers and guards in despotic, tyrannical, authoritarian regimes also don't see themselves as bad people. Instead, they see themselves as good people. The thin line guarding the Empire from chaos, corruption, whatever the this is. And so when we look at a person like Cyril and Dedra, what really sets them apart from the rank and file Imperials is just the extra steps they're willing to take to get the job done. Some might call that ambition. Cyril pushes for more responsibility, works hard to prosecute this case against Cassian on Ferrix. He clearly doesn't sleep much, during this whole ordeal. And then you have Dedra, who really sticks her neck out by launching this Axis network theory and investigation. Something that I gotta say, I don't think the other ISB supervisors would dare to do, because that means risking failure and potentially losing territory to the other ISB officers. It's almost like Major Partagaz has set this entire thing up to see who the real hunters are, who the people who are here for the sport of the hunt and not just for power itself. So Cyril, Karn, and Dedra Meero are not driven by typical ambition. That is rooted in that great power and control we talked about. That is the pursuit of lesser men and women. It's the pursuit of the ISB officers that works with Dedra Meero. No, instead, these two are driven by something far more powerful, and that is the zeal of righteousness. They believe that they are on the side of good. Now, this is easier to see in Cyril because he has these really epic sounding lines like, "There comes a time when the risk of doing nothing is the greatest risk of all." I mean, the way Cyril says is a bit meeker, of course. He's unsure because, again, his mom destroys his sense of self every morning, like Prometheus getting his liver gouged out by an eagle. But you can see that righteousness even better in this next clip, which happens after he saves Dedra Meero, which allows him to regain some of his pride and manhood and confidence.
I had uncovered a cabal of corrupt purchasing agents who were stealing Imperial supplies in 4 sectors.
Do you hear the sniffing? It's like he's trying to soak in the smell of fear and confusion that's emanating off of this poor new recruit. Cyril is so intense, man. Why?
There's a future here for those who dare.
Cyril wears his righteousness on his sleeve, open for everyone to see, just like an overzealous mall security guard. Dedra's zeal is much better hidden, and this is probably why people take her far more seriously. Because she doesn't talk in this very self-righteous and tone-deaf way. She's not giving speeches at all to other people, and when she does communicate, she's usually very efficient with her words, right? There's no grandstanding. There's no attempt to inspire other people. But just because she avoids these things doesn't mean that she's not a righteous person or driven by her own righteousness. It doesn't mean that she isn't a complete fanatic. And it was the scene in Orson Krennic's Eagle Nest that really convinced me of this, because her approach here, her suggestion for some kind of controlled opposition, no doubt will lead to a false flag attack. She probably hasn't figured out all of the elements of what she's suggesting, but I think she has a sense that she's heading into dangerous waters with this idea. This is probably why Orson Krennic wants someone like her on his team. He wants someone crazy enough, someone fanatic enough to actually suggest the measures necessary to make sure that his operation is successful. An Imperial-backed Gorman resistance movement will most likely have to carry out some kind of mass casualty event like the one we keep seeing in the trailers. This is an attack that will kill innocent people and in many ways perversely abuse the trust that Imperial citizens have for the security apparatus, something that I think Dedra Meero is very proud to be a part of. And so to suggest all of this madness is a sign that she is 100% committed to the cause. A fanatic fueled by the zeal of righteousness. The only other explanation would be that she's a monster, and I think that's too simple of an explanation. So where does this righteousness come from? Well, why do Cyril and Dedra view the galaxy in such an extreme and fanatic way? Why are they so devoted to keeping order? Well, I think it comes from an obsession for control that is rooted in their own childhood traumas. Some people are naturally born more anxious and fearful of the world. There's nothing wrong with that, right? This is our genetics. This is our personality that we're born with. These are the environmental factors that have affected us when we were young children. This is just how some people are, and some people who are extremely anxious might develop certain behavioral issues like obsessive compulsive disorder, which leads to uncontrollable behaviors to a certain extent. And yes, in many cases, trauma worsens these types of behavioral issues and personality traits, which then manifests itself in some pretty extreme behavior. Now, neither Cyril nor Dedra exhibits OCD traits. They are in control of their behavior fully, but they do have an obsession for control, one that is more ideological and driven by their views of the galaxy. And this, again, is caused by their experiences as children. For Cyril, it's his overbearing mother and her complete lack of love and kindness for him. I wouldn't be surprised if Eedy constantly tormented him as a child about the cleanliness of his room and his clothing, which led him to become extremely orderly as well, which not only gives him a reprieve from his mother's constant attacks, but it also gives him a sense of agency and control over his life. What's kind of sad is if you notice Cyril's attention to detail when it comes to clothing and his tailoring skills, they're all quite good. Beneath that tortured look on his face is clearly the soul of a creative, an artist who who demands that the clothing he wears has a special flair that reflects his true self, an ego which desires to be seen, something that really pisses off Eedy, clearly.
I'm a peacock! You gotta let me fly!
Had Cyril, Karn, and Luther been born during a different era when you had maybe a milder government, a galaxy that wasn't in complete crisis, in that kind of situation, I can see these two sitting down and having a discussion about the latest fashion and trends. Cyril would still be a bit more authoritarian, Luthen a bit more civil, libertarian, but the love of art and fashion would unite them far more than the politics that divide them. And then there's Dedra's story, which is even more shocking and horrifying than Cyril's experience.
My parents were criminals. They were arrested when I was 3. I was raised in an imperial kinderblock.
Like, look at Cyril's face. Look at that reaction.
I was raised in an imperial kinderblock.
Yeah, so this is Dedra's blind spot. Like, she says that line about the kinder blocks that she grew up in like it's not a problem, right? Cyril, at least to a certain extent, understands that he's kind of damaged. I mean, he visually gets to see that which harms him every morning at the breakfast table. And this is probably why Cyril Karn is somewhat awkward and lacks confidence when talking to other people. Dedra, on the other hand, does not have that problem. Her problem is she doesn't know about her own trauma. She's basically that girl who was brought up and raised by wolves in the forest, you know. I mean, an Imperial Kinderblock sounds absolutely terrifying. I'm imagining that facility where they kept Omega in the Bad Batch. I imagine Imperial Detention Center is a place devoid of love and parental warmth, and when children have to go through situations like that, they tend to grow up very quickly, leaving a girl like Dedra with a hardened exterior and toughness that will one day become brittle and fall from the weight of all the trauma that's accumulated on her surface, the trauma that she's endured in life, revealing a foundation that is neither stable nor healthy. Dedra subconsciously has this obsession with control, a fanaticism that even outweighs Cyril Karn's, and that is because her trauma is also far greater. And so even if she appears more calm and measured than Cyril on the surface, beneath it all, she's far less stable than Cyril. She has far less warmth. And this means she's willing to do very extreme things to protect that side of herself. And because she's unable to make sense of this part of her own personality, this means she also really doesn't understand who she is as a person. And I'm almost certain that this will lead to a crisis of some kind in the second half of the season. I talk a lot about empathy on this channel, but it's not always about being nice and compassionate to other people because you understand their situation in life. That's just a lovely byproduct of empathy. But empathy is also one of the most useful tools one can have in their journey to understanding the world and the people in it. In the right hands, empathy and understanding can help you destroy your nemesis very quickly. The great Ender Wiggins, the savior of humanity, commander of Earth's forces against the Bugger invasion. He once said the following: "In the moment when I truly understand my enemy, understand him well enough to defeat him, then in that very moment I also love him." When he says understand, he means it from an emotional intelligence point of view. Ender Wiggins was an extremely gifted individual, very quick-witted, but he was also very sensitive and raised by loving parents. But what happens when you're born with Ender Wiggins' gifted mind, but not his emotional intelligence? Well, then you have characters like Thrawn, who, like Cyril and Dedra, had a strong desire and obsession for control, which often overrides his more utilitarian and rational parts of his psyche. Thrawn doesn't really understand people, right? And it's not just because he's from the unknown region and he's amongst new species he's not used to being around. It's just who he is as a person. He's horrible with personal politics, and I think he understands this weakness he has, and it probably scares him to a certain degree. Now, as a young officer in the Chiss Expansionary Defense Force, great contradicting name by the way, Thrawn would face all types of new Xeno threats without much prior information and knowledge about them. And so he would learn to pick up contextual clues from his enemy's ships' designs. More importantly, he would also take a look at the art and designs that adorn the surface of these ships, and then using his highly analytical mind, he connects certain designs with certain personality types that leads to certain battlefield tendencies and strategies. This isn't actually true empathy, right? I would actually argue that Thrawn has emotional intelligence issues and a lack of empathy, because he's not really covering the full emotional spectrum here. He understands fear, but he knows very little of love and joy. And so while many view Thrawn as a genius, there's another side to him that is kind of limited. He's blind to certain things. And it's sad to live like this. I mean, to never feel butterflies in your stomach when you know she's the one, to never cry for someone else, to never feel the loving embrace of someone who cares for you. This is deprivation in the cruelest sense of the word. Dedra isn't completely without care or empathy, of course. There's that time when she shows concern for her underling's lack of sleep, and obviously stepping in for Cyril and defending him in front of her mother. These are all good deeds. But clearly her empathy is just limited to the ones that are closest to her, the people that she trusts. And, obviously because of her past, she doesn't trust many people. What she doesn't have is universal empathy, and surely no empathy for criminals like Bix Killeen, who she tortures in the most brutal but also non-physical way, which is exactly how Dedra likes to do things. No extra bruising, no unnecessary violence, because she's not brutal, she's not cruel, she's not chaotic. like the rebels, right? That's what she thinks. But we know better. You know, the destruction of the mind, the unseen horrors that she causes to Bix Kathleen, somehow that's justifiable. Perhaps it is, you know, by her obsession for control, by her sense of righteousness. But that is all predicated by her belief that the Empire is good and right. But now Dedra has trapped herself. She should have never given Orson Krennic the idea about a controlled opposition, and it's clear she wants to focus on the Axis network, as she tells Major Partagast, but, you know, when Orson Krennic calls your name, you kind of have to obey. And now Dedra will be involved in a very dark and grimy operation that will dirty her clean white uniform. She will kill innocent people. She will create chaos and uncertainty, which she hates. She will have to eventually cross her own moral line, wherever it is drawn in the sand. And at that point, she'll finally question if she's on the right side of history or not, a question that only her soul and moral compass can answer. And if she is honest with herself, well, then her entire belief system collapses. And, you know, as a person devoid of a family, that belief system is almost everything for her. She will destabilize. Do you notice how Dedra rarely ever gets angry or shows any emotion? Well, that is the control that she prides herself in. She has this obsession we keep talking about, right? This is how she sees herself. This is how she wants to see herself. But all of her emotions, you know, they're still there. They're just shoved underneath this lid on top of this pressure cooker, you know, which is her mind and her feelings. Once all of that righteousness disappears, she'll have to confront everything she's done, all the damage, all the broken families and lives she's taken. She'll be lost, more lost than she's ever felt since she was a child in those kinder blocks. She'll be bombarded by a sense of betrayal, and then by fear, and eventually that will lead to anger, like a lot of anger, just pure black hatred. That would make a Sith Lord blush. One really wonders what kind of damage she can do at that point. So there you have it, guys. That is our coverage about Dedra Meero. I know I sound really like calm and contemplative right now. It's just because I'm tired. I'm very tired. But I'm super excited to see how all of this plays out. Like, there's so much more I want to talk about between Dedra and Cyril Karn. Like, that relationship is just hey, there's a lot of things that needs to be said. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I look forward to hearing your comments about Dedra Meero's personality and how you think she'll act and what she'll do in this season. And as usual, yeah, like, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.